and welcome back to my studio in the basement. Again, my name is Daylen Luchsinger. I'm an art educator for Artists for Kids in North Vancouver. It is spring outside, but my basement tends to be pretty chilly, so that's why I'm all kind of bundled up down here. Today, we're going to look at a painting by Canadian artist Damian Moppett. And we are going to create some artwork of our own. To introduce the artwork, it's a painting, and the title of that painting is Painting and Figure Maquette in Studio at Night. It's a visual representation of Damian's art studio, and the title simply describes the space and some of the objects that are in the painting. Damian was born in Alberta. He lives and works in Vancouver here. I think recently he's also been working on the one of the Gulf Islands here in BC. His artwork has always been interested in materials, so the materials he chooses to use, be it clay or paint or drawing or video, how he can play and explore with those, and the process of making art, and then really the history of what objects tell us. And I know that sounds kind of like a complicated idea, but I think we can find objects in our house and we can think about the stories that they tell us or the memories that they represent. And so I've done a little bit of scavenging in my house and basement here to find some objects to create artwork with in this project today. Okay, well, we're all set up here. Again, I'll just go over the supplies needed for this project. We're going to need scissors or something to cut with, a pencil, a sharpener potentially for your pencil, eraser, a pen. We're going to make our own stencils, and we'll need some paper and then something to color your artwork with. That can be crayons, pastels, or paint. I'll show you a couple of those things. Oh, and you might want an envelope, because there is a potential way to share this artwork and maybe collaborate with a friend or family member in this artwork. So to start, our first step is going to be making our own stencils and collecting images. So I'll just go through some of the things I've found. I tend to use a lot of squares in my artwork, but I decided to go with a canning jar lid for one object, thinking about food and just some of the things. I planted the garden recently and trying to eat some of the food. This one, I guess, was from 2017, trying to eat some of the food that we have here. I also found a French curve, which I think just reminds me of growing up and working with some of my dad's art supplies. He worked in newspaper advertising and design. And then my other objects that I've made stencils with, again, is food. This one's asparagus. No real connection, except I like the color and the shape of that one. And another stencil is of a cowboy. This is actually a Canadian artist named Rodney Graham, who does a lot of video and photography based art, but I like the shape and subject matter of cowboys. My grandfather always used to read me some Western stories when I was growing up. And then I've got some little stencils of a carrot, again back to food. I think just planting the garden recently, and then a saguaro cactus, which reminds me of my other grandfather who lived down in Phoenix, Arizona. And lastly, I've got an image of a bunny rabbit, which is from another famous German artist, Albrecht Dürer, but I just also, as a kid, grew up having a pet bunny rabbit, so I kind of like the idea of a bunny. So I've collected all of objects and images that I want to use, but let's make a stencil now. So to be able to use a stencil more and more, it's good to use a heavier paper weight to make your stencil. So this bunny rabbit, for example, it's on just really thin, flimsy printer paper. But I've taken here a magazine cover, which is a little heavier stock. And to make my stencil, I'm going to place my rabbit down there. I'm going to, with my pencil, trace the outline carefully, and then using scissors or another way to cut it, I'm going to cut it out. I have pre-done that, so then I have, as you can see here, my rabbit stencil. So that's step one, is to make and collect your stencils for our artwork. Okay, now that we have all of our objects and stencils, some of them you may have started thinking about the stories or the meaning of those objects, as I kind of mentioned in mine, but the next step is to start using those. So I'm just using basic 8.5 by 11 paper. I also, in trying to reuse things, I've cut some old cereal boxes up to use as well, and I'm going to use the inside of them, and I'll show you that once we're finished, but I'll start just on this plain piece of paper. So now that you have stencils, it's just kind of organizing them in the space. And so I will start with my cowboy figure here, and holding it down. This is just a bit of an exercise in patience too, of just slowly, gently outlining your stencil. Things can extend off the page if you want. Everything does not have to fit on the page. This is an art lesson, so I'm giving you some guidelines, but I think art is one of those subjects where the rules aren't all that firm or strict. You get to kind of change things and adapt them. So there, I've traced a stencil, and now I'm going to continue to play with other objects and other stencils. So I'm going to start to put a bit of a circle in here. And you can trace all the way around, and then if there's a part of it that you do not want, that's where you can get your eraser and take that part away. Generally speaking, the lighter you press with the pencil, the easier it is to erase things. Alright, I've got a bit of a smudge there, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to be coloring and painting this. I'm going to continue placing some of my stencils. I'll pause now and do a little bit more work and be right back. Okay, as you can see, I've started to fill up my paper using my stencils. One thing to consider is using a stencil maybe more than once. So you can see here I've used the circle, the lid of the mason jar here and here, and then I've started to place some carrots in, and I'm gonna complete my last carrot just over here. And now for the next step is just erasing any lines that I don't want. So I don't want that part of the bunny. I want the carrot there. I want the carrot to come over top of that circle or moon or whatever that is. And then I want the carrot to be up front above the cowboy's hat there. So now that I've erased those things, I'm going to grab a marker and just start to outline things. You can use any type of pen that you have. You don't even have to use a pen if you don't want. You could just use the pencil lines that you created. So here you see I've outlined my composition, or all my objects, in a liner, and now I'm ready to make a decision. And at this point I want to talk a little bit about sharing our artwork. So you have an option now of coloring it in yourself, or you could choose to share the art or leave the artwork unfinished at this stage and share it with a friend or family member of yours. So you could package it up in an envelope. I'm gonna start sharing some artwork with my dad, who's in Toronto. So I'm gonna make one or two more, and then I'm going to send these off to him and see what he does, and hopefully he'll paint a little bit on them or draw a little bit on them, change them, and send them back to me, or send me pictures of them. If you choose to finish it yourself, it's good to display your artwork. You could do that in a window of your home or on the door, if you're in an apartment building or something like that, so you can share a little bit of your story and a bit of color in our day-to-day lives. You'll see some links to share your art digitally, and I think this is a neat little project. It looks at ways of how we tell stories. If we look back at Damian's artwork, we see the scene of an art studio, his studio, the objects he's surrounded himself with, a projector shining light on an unfinished painting and a sculpture up in the bottom right corner. The objects you choose all tell a story, and then if you send it to someone else, they're going to add a little bit of their own story to it. So there's some nice storytelling that we can do. It's a little bit of an exploration of your own space and identity, and hopefully this project just helps us all out in these kind of isolated times, and it's a different way of communicating. It's maybe a little more analog, or we can find this digital way to communicate this as well. I want to thank you all for joining me. I also did finish one to kind of show coloring it in. So this is on my Rice Krispie box that I had, and just to show that to you here, I've colored it all in using everything from crayons to some paint, and I think some of this was coffee over here that I painted with. I hope you all enjoyed, and tune in next week again for more videos.